On this debut episode of Deep Dive, we are going to go and talk about the illustrious history of the NWA World Women's Championship. Stay tuned.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet.
Welcome back to Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet. I am Candace, and I am really excited to have this platform to really get into some amazing conversations about women's wrestling and take the time to really dive into this. So on this show, we'll be talking about different women's promotions, women in wrestling, amazing feuds, factions, all that good stuff in this show. So on the debut episode, I thought it would be really fitting to talk about NWA because they're coming back with a really exciting season. And I must say, I've talked about this on my own separate podcast, The Ladies Wrestling Grill, that this new era of NWA has been fantastic. And I think over the past few months after NWA 75, we've just seen a preview of what's to come with this new era of NWA. So I thought it really would be fitting to talk about this amazing long history of the NWA World Women's Championship. This belt has had so many women, 42 to be exact, 42 women to hold this title, or 41 reigns, I should say, of this, between 32 wrestlers and 8 vacancies. So as you know, already with that, there has been a lot of ups and downs with this title, but more ups certainly than downs. So we're going to start off with the first woman to hold this NWA World Women's Championship, and that is Mildred Burke. Mildred Burke won the NWA Women's World Championship after she defeated Clara Mortensen in 1935. Clara held the first World Women's title, but I don't believe that it was ever recognized by NWA as the first NWA Women's Championship before Burke. And really, when Mildred came onto the scene, she really helped to set the tone of what a world champion, a women's world champion, was like. Her look was supposed to mirror that of the silver screen starlets of that time. And at the time, you had Billy Wolf, who was her husband, who was a manager, and a very infamous promoter at the time. And he really had the idea to showcase women's wrestling that really showed off the muscle and glamour in the way that he pinned it, sex, muscle, and diamonds philosophy to the wrestling world using women's wrestlers. And Mildred was known to wear fur coats, diamonds, high heel shoes, and dazzling dresses. Mildred got into the business as someone who initially started off with wrestling or having the pretext of wrestling a lot of men that would challenge her at circus events. And obviously we know with the history of wrestling, the circus and wrestling have always had a love relationship and has always been similar in certain ways, with showing very odd or not so up-to-date versions of what people could do in society before that. So they would usually live the life of people that were on the fringes of society. And of course, at that time, when Mildred was trying to get her feet wet in wrestling, she certainly was someone that would make a name for herself in wrestling. But at that time, women's wrestling, of course, wasn't really a thought in anyone's mind. So she would challenge men to see if they could actually out wrestle her in the circus. And every single time she won. And she really put her best foot forward and decided to approach Billy Wolf about wrestling full time. And initially he was not interested at all. And he made sure that he could try to push her away from it by having a man that was one of the wrestlers that I believe he was training try to body slam her, but actually she wind up doing it to him. And that really made him feel like she had the fortitude and, let's be honest, the balls to make it in this industry. So after that, it was off to the races. And Mildred was not just known in wrestling, she actually gained a national following in the entertainment world in general. And that was phenomenal for the onslaught of this thing called women's wrestling actually being enjoyed by the masses. And there were many times where you could see these amazing photos of her with legendary wrestlers like Luthez and being able to be admired just as much as her male counterparts was. And in my opinion, one of her best opponents was Mae Weston. I think that they both had such an aggressive style that really blended well together, and they would really keep each other on their toes in the ring. So that's definitely one opponent that I feel should be highlighted when we think about Mildred Berg's title reign. And of course, with all these highs that Mildred was getting, the press outside of wrestling, the respect that she did, even though there were still a lot of flaws with how Mildred Berg was treated within the NWA territory, but specifically on the business end of it, there were a lot of great things that came from her title reign. But it kind of hit a really bad note when she divorced from Billy Wolf. She was shunned by the NWA because at that time, there wasn't any woman, even if you were Mildred Berg, allowed to be able to attend those meetings that they would have that would ultimately decide this, who would be champ, how the territories would be ran, and how people would be pushed in those territories. She was not allowed. She had to sit in the behind the scenes and not really be able to help make decisions that ultimately affected her. And it didn't help that Billy Wolf and Mildred had such a bitter divorce, with Billy actually getting the rights to the business that they helped create together, Attractions Inc. So she was very much left on the outside after the divorce. And of course, this NWA women's title is still very prestigious. So instead of actually just putting certain things to the side and letting the professional hat be put on, Billy Wolf just decided to get a replacement, and he really pushed for June Byers to be able to hold that title. And for about a year, Mildred did not want to have any of this. She wanted to keep that title, and she didn't want things to become a bit too murky and too personal with fighting someone like June Byers. But eventually, Billy Wolf got his way, and these women had to duke it out. Now, at this time, June Byers won the title on June 14th, 1953, in a 13 women's tournament. Around the country, depending on which territory you were in, there was a difference in opinion over who was the real NWA women's champ. And Billy wanted to solidify that his hand-picked champion, June Byers, was once and for all the real NWA women's champion. This whole thing between the Billy Wolf, Mildred Berg, and June Byers fiasco is really something straight out of a soap opera, but it really did happen, and it created a lot of controversy. And this very disgusting aspiration that Billy Wolf had to really want to erase the history that Mildred Berg had with this title was in full swing, but Mildred decided that she wanted to put an end to the questions over who was the real NWA Women's Champion, and she decided to actually participate in this match. So we see now, finally, this has been laid out. This match, this 2 out of 3 falls match between Mildred Berg and June Byers is all set. The only issue is that at this point in time, because remember, Mildred Berg initially won the title in 1935, you can start to see a bit of the wear and tear from her career at this point. And unfortunately, it was reflected in her abilities in this matchup. But even then, she came in feeling very confident, but there was still a lot that visibly showed that she wasn't necessarily, Mildred was not necessarily in her prime like June Byers was. So here we are, August 20th, 1954. These two women square off in Atlanta. Byers gets the first round. Now, according to Mildred Burke, the first round was something that she just handed off to June Byers because she knew that she was going to get the second round. However, the second round does not go off as smoothly as we would have wanted as a fan base. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I would have loved to have been at this match, but the second round of this match, this 2 out of 3 falls match, lasts an entire hour. And even then, the fans did not get a conclusive decision on who actually won. So they end off the match. It has been an hour for the second round. And at that point, when it's the end, no one was really called as the champion. So you went through all of this, a year where both women are being plucked, to have this match. June Byers wins the first round. The second round is pretty much a cluster, you know what, and we still don't have a definitive champ. And even when you read books now about this match, you really can't tell who actually won. Byers was ultimately announced the winner of this match, and by that token, the NWA World's Women's Champion by the Atlanta Athletic Commission. However, we do know, especially with Billy Wolf being a very prominent promoter at the time, that he had so much pull over who won that honestly, I don't think that Mildred could have come out as the champion, even if she really had a strong showing in this match. The whole fight was a hot mess, and it only further pissed off Burke and brought a controversy, honestly, to June Byers' reign in some ways. So Mildred went onto her own at this time because it really was an uphill battle that just would not have given her the results that she wanted, which was to hold the NWA World Women's Championship again. So she decided to start her own promotion, the World's Women's Wrestling Association, and traveled all over the world to bring the idea of women's wrestling internationally. And her company had International Women's Inc. really played a part in bringing wrestling to Mexico, Japan, women's wrestling specifically, and really helped to set the tone of what Joshi wrestling was going to be for promotions like All Women's Japan Pro Wrestling. And All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling bought the legal rights to her title in the 70s. So even though Mildred had to go through so much crap for something that she really loved, which was women's wrestling, but the NWA World Women's title, I personally think with everything that she accomplished over the last few decades of her life, kind of superseded her reign because she helped set the tone for what women can have or could have in women's wrestling after that. Look at the amazing memories that we have for Joshi wrestling in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. With her making the rounds across the world to really bring the idea, the proper training, the techniques for women's wrestling, that helps set the tone for what we have now and legends that we really celebrate that really took from her style of wrestling and evolved it and took it to the stratosphere. So yes, I absolutely love Mildred Burke's NWA World Women's title reign, but certainly her legacy goes way past that. So I really encourage you that if you have not read, for instance, Queen of the Ring, which I think is an amazing book that really catalogs Mildred Burke's career, I really, really recommend that you do, because it really helps to put into perspective everything that she did, and yes, everything that she went through, which was not an easy journey in this industry. Now, even though June Byers kind of started off her title reign in a very controversial fashion, I don't want to ignore her title reign because it was a very successful run. So at the point when June Byers was officially recognized by the wrestling world, she really had a great run that continued to uphold what that NWA World Women's Championship was about. She had a great technical skills and athleticism that improved women's wrestling to the general public. So much so that Byers was able to make appearances on popular game shows like What's My Line and I've Got a Secret. So it kept with Mildred Bird's groundwork that she laid to make sure that women's wrestling was seen as a part of the American fabric of entertainment. And June Byers continued that. So I think that is something, despite all of the controversy that went with her winning the title, that June Byers really did help to keep that legacy going with making women's wrestling become a thing that was more of the norm at that time. And she was a fan favorite as a champ. June Byers was the face of women's wrestling during her reign. And she really was known to work pretty stiff with newcomers. Which was the norm at that time. I mean, if you look at clips of women's wrestling in the 1950s, because of what the women really had to prove about their toughness, you can definitely see, just like their male counterparts, they were working pretty stiff. One of June Byers' favorite opponents actually was Penny Banner. And the two had great deal of respect for one another. And Byers even ranked Banner as one of her toughest opponents. So it was really good to see that as we're moving away from the controversy of the 2 out of 3 falls match, that there was just a steady pattern and stability of great women's matches and great title defenses that June Byers had at that time. And due to her winning the title in the middle of the 1950s, it really set the tone for what we could see from women's wrestling at that time. And after really researching Byers' time as a champ, I definitely would continue to put that out there, that you should really check out her matches. I don't know how we have as much footage as we do of that reign, but I'm so happy that we do, because it's really good stuff. And she definitely, despite what anyone might think about her getting the title, June Byers was a very formidable champ. So after we get from the June Byers title reign, we see that, you know what, I have to add one more part to it. In 1956, Byers announced her retirement, but she still wanted to keep the title and to be recognized as champ. We've seen that in future wrestlers' history, but this is one of the first times that a champion actually wanted to still be recognized as the champ, even when they knew that they were going to retire. And even though she made this clear, the Baltimore Commission thought otherwise, and they stripped her of the title. At that point, a 13-woman battle royal took place to determine the new champion. And the woman that won this title was the Fabulous Moolah, as she won this title for the first time. Now, nobody come for me, okay? Because Fabulous Moolah is a part of the NWA World Championship history. I can't do anything about that. Regardless of like how I feel about certain things, she is definitely a huge part of why we still talk about the NWA World's Women's Championship. So we're just going to keep it on the facts of her title reign. All right? Okay, just want to put that out there. So Moolah wasn't actually recognized as the NWA World's Women's Champ at first. June Byers came out of retirement to face her, but Moolah succeeded at defeating Byers and started her initial 10-year reign as NWA World Women's Champion. Moolah defended her title against top wrestlers like Judy Grable and Donna Cristanello. And I will say this was another important time, I feel, in really solidifying a lot of other women that may not have held the title, but also became legendary in their own right. And they should be a part of those conversations when you're talking about the early history of women's wrestling in the US. So it was really cool to see that these women, when you look up Moolah's title reign, you can see these women be a part of it, and she really had some great women to work with during her title reign. And Moolah became the first woman to compete at Madison Square Garden and helped usher in the right for women to wrestle in New York. So at that time, there really was a push from other female wrestlers too, but Moolah was able to fully usher in the ability for women to wrestle at obviously one of the most well-known stadiums in the world, Madison Square Garden. So that was a huge triumph for women's wrestling to be able to get ushered in into essentially a new era in women's wrestling. At that time in the 70s, Moolah bought rights, legal rights, to own the NWA World Women's Championship. And I do find that to be really cool, because even now you don't hear about really anyone like really fighting to own the championship. I think that's another level of really committing to fully feeling like you are that eternal champ and really wanted to have it. But even on a business end, especially when you saw at that time, just like I mentioned with Mildred Burke, that she started her own promotion that really could have, if Moolah wanted to usher in her having her own promotion, because essentially she owned the title at that time. So I actually love that that was a part of her history. But as it takes a turn with what Moolah did afterwards, not really a fan of that. So in the 70s, Moolah bought the legal rights to it. But she did decide in 1983 to sell the NWA World Women's Championship to Miss McMahon Jr. so that she could regularly appear in WWF and essentially turn that physical title into the WWF Women's Championship. And I'm not gonna lie, it just felt, because obviously at that time the landscape of women's wrestling in the early 80s was changing because of what Vince McMahon was bringing to the table. He wanted it to feel like any other form of entertainment, and really ramp up the use of cable, really ramp up the use of something that was a bit brand new, which was having monthly pay-per-view events. Now, you did have pay-per-view events, but he really wanted to take it further. And obviously, he was very successful in that. But for Moolah to feel, and you even see this sometimes with how her reign is described by WWE, where even they won't even tell the truth about the fact that there were times that Moolah did lose the NWA World's title. It wasn't long stints in when she lost it, but she did. She lost to women like Sue Green. She lost to to Sue Green, Evelyn Steffens, and Bette Butcher, and even traded her belt in Japan, but she quickly recaptured it. Usually, none of that history is ever mentioned. They love the swan story of her holding that title for, I believe, like 28 years and really going with that, not really giving the spotlight to the women that were trying to hold on to that title for a bit and get their name in history. That's usually not mentioned. So for Moolah to sell the physical NWA World Women title at the time, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of see it as a dick move. I get that she wanted to be in WWF at that time and, you know, secure that bag with being on TV regularly and putting her foot into a company that obviously already existed, was already known, but was in the 80s with WWF going to go into the stratosphere. Totally get that. But because it is a bit more complicated with NWA, with them at that time still having territories, she could have at least let that physical title still be out there in the atmosphere. But even with Moolah selling the NWA World Women's Championship to WWE at the time, the lineage, the history of the NWA World Women's title still continued on. But it did have a bit of a vacancy for 3 years until Debbie Combs became the champ. And Debbie Combs won the NWA World Women's Championship in a 9-woman battle royal on February 12, 1986 in Hawaii. Now, for some reason during this time, she stopped being recognized as the champion, so she had to defeat Penny Mitchell to become champion again on April 10th, 1987. Then it became vacated again when the Kansas City NWA affiliated promotion closed in 1987. And Combs lost her title, and Misty Blue Sims was awarded the NWA United States Championship. Sims didn't keep it for long because she became injured and she couldn't defend the title. So I feel like Debbie Combs couldn't get a break sometimes with trying to hang on to this championship. And it's funny because when I look back at the history, especially at this time for women's wrestling, but especially the NWA World's Women's title, I actually really would have loved if Debbie Combs would have gotten a long run. When I think of Debbie Combs, when I hear her really southern charming voice and how much of a baby face she was, I wish she could have had a longer title reign. But I think that she had the title long enough and had a really good run in places like AWA, WCW in the early 90s. And around this time, obviously going to different territories to really solidify that she was someone that was worthy of holding that title after Moolah's really long run. I think that Debbie just really had that NWA late 70s, early 80s look and feel to her that really, in my eyes, fit what the NWA World Women's title was all about. She really had, to me, she was like a great counterpart to that 70s and 80s NWA style and personality that you saw from like a very humble Dusty Rhodes, or a lot of ways in her costuming, the flash that like Ric Flair possessed. I think that she was a great female counterpart to what you were seeing at that time in territory. So even though Debbie didn't have a long title reign, and many times it was kind of fumbled with her sometimes not being recognized as the champion, but sometimes I fully recognize Debbie Combs as an amazing NWA World's Women's Champion. So once again, after Debbie's reign, even when she was able to recapture it, we still went into another vacancy of the NWA World's Women's Championship until the early 90s. And that actually mirrors what you saw with women's wrestling in the US with promotions like WWE. In the 80s, they were really ramping up to have a strong run for the WWF women's title, but then they just like completely stopped once you got into like 80, 88, 89, and the NWA World's Women's Championship kind of had the same hiatus. So you kind of see, and territories were really dying at that time. So it makes sense that, especially the way that women's wrestling was seen at the time, you weren't going to have this big push to keep women's wrestling or the NWA women's title up and running at that time. So there was that vacancy that you saw in the early 90s. But then in the 90s, you saw Bambi capture the title. And Bambi wrestled women like Medusa, Leilani Kai, and Judy Martin in 1991 before holding on to the NWA championship for about 3 years. And one of, to me, one of the most notable champions of that time for the NWA World Championship was Malia Hosaka. I really wish that Malia would have gotten a long run, because I feel like when I think of that mid-90s women's wrestler, I do think of Malia, and I think about that really great run, even though they didn't fully strap on what they could have with the WCW women's division. The peaks that we saw of the WCW women's division in 96, 97, a little bit of 98, with Malia Hosaka being a part of that, I feel that it would have been really smart to really have her carry that NWA World Championship and really go to different territories and really represent it, and then possibly have where that could have been brought into storyline with WCW. But just like I said, in the 90s, in the US, you weren't seeing a huge push for women's wrestling. But I am happy that even though it was not a long run, that Malia Hosaka was even able to hold the title and have that be a part of her history. we can always wish of what could have been, but I still wish that Malia would have had a longer run. So in the 90s, Debbie Combs again became the NWA champion in the mid 90s, but then the title sees another vacancy. So this is what I'm saying. Debbie Combs could not catch a break at all. It wasn't until 2000 when Strawberry Fields wins the title that you see a resurgence a bit of it. And one of the people that one of the women that I feel really helped to bring a resurgence to this title, especially as we're getting into that golden era for women's wrestling in the early 2000s, was Leilani Kai's title reign. This was a really good title reign. The reason why I feel that way is because Leilani Kai was someone that really wanted to push for women's wrestling to continue on and have a bit more pride in it. Because obviously the early 2000s were really coming off of the Attitude Era in general. So everything was amped up, not just the way that women were showcased, everything in general. So to have someone that was at that point a legend like Leilani Kai come back and really try to work with a lot of women that were on the indie roster and really try to formulate a really good women's it wasn't necessarily a division, but really try to set up some formidable opponents that could really give her a run for her money with the title. Because you can see that even though this was, I'm pretty sure, a dream of Leilani Kai, especially because of her history with NWA that started in the 1970s. Kai had performed for NWA promotions and became a 6-time tag team champion, but hadn't got the honor of winning the NWA World Women's Championship until March 12, 2003. In an interview, she stated that she never thought that she would get the honor of holding the NWA World Women's Championship. So she took that title reign seriously, and it certainly showed. To this day, Leilani makes sure that she publicly shows her support for the NWA product, and she is still NWA through and through. So I really liked this title reign from Leilani Kai because the NWA championship, with the inconsistencies and the vacancies that it went through in the 90s, it really needed someone like Leilani Kai to really bring some attention back to it and really put in the seriousness of what everyone really loved about that title. So after Leilani Kai, you really start to see that business is picking up again in this mid 2000s era of women's wrestling with this title, and we're starting to get into one of my favorite periods. But yes, this is Leilani Kai, and I must say I'm just such a huge fan of Leilani Kai. I think that, in my opinion, she does not get the respect that she deserves for everything that she's done for women's wrestling, and still that joy that you see when she talks about women's wrestling to this day. I saw some amazing comments that she made about the title reign of Camille, which we will be getting to very soon. But I just love that respect that she has for that title and how it surpasses anything that the actual champ is doing. It actually just speaks for itself. You are representing that title. It's not always about you, if that makes sense. But I always thought that people like that have that type of reverence for a title always have strong runs because they understand the title is more important than them. So big ups to Leilani Kai. So once again, mid-2000s, we really get some things cooking with this title. So we see Leilani Kai's title reign. We see Kylie McLean hold the title. Lexi Fife, who is obviously one of the biggest promoters of women's wrestling, hold the title. We have Christy Ricci hold the title. And then we get to the late 2000s when the NWA World Women's Championship really heats up. And one of my favorites of all time holds this title, And thanks to promotions like Shimmer, Ring of Honor, and NWA affiliated promotions, we get some great women's matches at this time. So when you still have the NWA World's Women's Championship running around, someone has to feel like that's one of their aspirations in this industry at the time, to hold that illustrious title, because at that time enough decades had gone by for the NWA Women's World Title to feel like this prominent thing that you wanted to hold if you felt like you were one of the strongest champs at that time. No matter what gold you held in other promotions, you wanted to hold that NWA World's Women's Championship. So it was definitely a goal to be able to get it. And we also have at this time in the mid to late 2000s, the NWA Women's Midwest Championship that was floating around and that was heavily coveted at the same time. So one of the best NWA World Champions, in my opinion, that you saw come onto the scene was Mischief. I'm sorry, we're gonna geek out a little bit because Mischief is still one of my favorite wrestlers, male or female, period. She's just one of the best. And it always hurts my soul that I don't hear her talked about enough when she did so much on the indie scene in the mid to late 2000s. On January 2007, Mischief won the NWA World Women's Championship against Christy Ricci. After winning the title, Mischief still had her eye on the NWA Midwest Championship that she wanted to take from Josie. This resulted in both women competing in a crown versus crown match. I just had to put as a side note, there were so many matches that were unification title matches in the mid 2000s that it was getting out of hand at one point. It's just a fun fact, and the thing that I just remember so much from every single promotion in the mid 2000s. But yeah, so Josie and Mischief had a crown versus crown match. And Mischief won the match and became the first woman to hold both the NWA Midwest Championship and the NWA World Championship. Another champion versus championship match was in Mischief's title reign, and she had to face off with the AWA Japan champion, Amazing Kong, in May 2007. There was a rematch between the two in September, exclusively for the NWA World Women's Championship belt, but Mischief failed to win the title. Just like I said about this amazing time for women's wrestling in general in the mid to late 2000s, this feud that we had between Mischief and Awesome Kong at this time was absolutely legendary. It was just perfect. So we have, and I need people to remember this. At this time, Amazing Kong was making a lot of history in Japan and becoming a huge attraction. But when she stepped foot on US soil to defend her title, but to also start taking it to the US women's wrestlers, this was a sight to see. This was the beginning years of the US fans really learning about Kong and what a force of nature she was. Kong usually dismantled her competition rather quickly, but with Mischief, she really did get a run for her money and had a formidable opponent who was extremely flexible and would allow Kong to bend her like a pretzel in moves that we had not seen yet. That was to the delight of many fans that were able to have the pleasure to see these matches. And even though we're talking about the matches that Awesome Kong and Mischief had in NWA, please don't think this was the end of their feud. No, they had matches in Shimmer, they had for other wrestling promotions, and I will implore you to look up these matches because they are some of the best women's matches that I have ever seen. So please take some time to check it out if you haven't. So we see where Mischief wins this rematch in September of 2007 against Awesome Kong, and Awesome Kong has her reign. And I must say, just like I was talking about, these women had amazing chemistry together. And I know that we talk about Gail Kim and Kong's chemistry in the ring, and we should. But we have to start putting respect on Mischief's name and add her to the great catalog of feuds that Kong has had over the years. She's definitely a part of that. And Kong continued to defend the NWA World Women's Championship. But once she signed to TNA, that happened to be at the same time that NWA and TNA, they severed ties. So at that time, they were not, TNA was not going to have the NWA championship be visible, on screen. So the NWA affiliation decided to pass the belt to Mischief. And in April 2008, Mischief won that title back, and she went on to defend her title against cheerleader Melissa and lost her title on July 24th, 2010 against Tasha Simone, ending her very impressive 818-day reign. So I'm telling you, if you want to dig deeper into a lot of great NWA Women's World Championship defenses, you have to look up Mischief, because not only was she a great NWA World Women's Champion, she was an amazing NWA Midwest champ. So check that out if you haven't. And if you have, but you kind of forgot how great that title reign was, you can definitely go back and utilize YouTube to its amazing points. And obviously, Awesome Kong's reign was great, but due to the amazing things that she was doing in TNA at the time, it had to be cut short. But I don't really think anyone shed any tears because of how great she was as a Knockouts champ. So we can let it slide for it to have to give up the NWA World Championship to have those great moments that she had in TNA. So we go from Mischief's title reign to Tasha Simone, who had 3 different title reigns. We had 3 different title reigns in the 2010s. We had Tasha Simone, Tiffany Rocks, and Casey Carlisle. Casey Carlisle's had a really impressive title run in 2012. Her title reign lasted 462 days. Casey had a really good feud with La Rosa Negra, who is now in NWA. And I think it's really cool that you still have women that were trying to keep that NWA World Championship alive, that are still a part of NWA and still making history with the promotion. So it's pretty cool that La Rosa Negra has that history with the NWA championship, even with just competing to try to get the title. And for what I was able to see with Casey, she really helped to continue to have eyes on the NWA World's Women's title and solidified that it was still a big deal to hold that title. And Casey would lose her title to Barbie Hayden. And Barbie Hayden was able to get her hands on that title in January 25th, 2014. And Barbie is another one of my favorites because I think that Barbie helped to bring in a lot of that same energy that we get from women that we see now, like Tiffany Stratton, from a lot of women we see that, like Charlotte, a lot of women that help to bring in that pure athleticism, but they have a bit of the glam, okay? They have a certain look that really helps to make them seem like they are separated from a lot of the other women that may not have the championship quality to them. And I think that Barbie really had a combination of great confidence, really good promo skills, good looks, and the athletic ability to really make her a formidable champion. She held the title for 378 days and was even able to defend her title in China. So this was a really strong NWA Women's Championship title reign. And even though Barbie has retired from wrestling, I really pin her as one champion that I always think about when I think about the NWA World Women's Championship. Barbie lost her title on February 7th, 2015 to Santana Garrett, who is another great champ. I really, when I think about that 2010s time, I think about someone like Santana Garrett, who was really making a name for herself at that time. And it just made sense that she would also hold the NWA World Women's Championship. But on December 18th, 2015, Santana lost the title to Amber Gallows. And Amber Gallows at the time was definitely a wrestler that I would think of when I thought of someone that would hold the NWA title. Due to her style and brand of wrestling, she really was a perfect fit to hold the NWA title. She was known at the time as the Bullet Babe, with her affiliation to the Bullet Club that was just on fire at the time. I mean, they were at their peak around 2015. And she was obviously at the time married to Luke Gallows. So you had someone that even complimented her rough, tough wrestling ability in the ring, and her being affiliated with such a rough, tough faction like the Bullet Club. Her appearances in New Japan at the time, which everyone was watching. I think that it was the perfect time to have Amber hold that title. I think it made the NWA Women's Championship look really good at that time. And even though it was a short run, because just because of, you know, how you usually see the trajectory of this title, Amber was also the first woman to hold the NWA Charlotte Women's Championship. But due to that promotion folding, she did not hold that title for long. So for Amber to be able to then after be able to actually hold the official NWA Women's World Championship at such a great time for the business in 2015 was incredible. All the way up into 2016, Amber lost the women's title on September 17th, 2016 to Jazz. And I gotta roll up the sleeves a bit, because this is someone that I can't even put to words how much I admire Jazz, but this subject is such a sore one for me because of the fact that I absolutely love that Jazz held this title. But I'm going to get in my feelings once I start talking about the end of her title reign. Jazz won the title on September 17, 2016. And this title reign was not really televised. And this is when NWA was going through another stint of not really knowing what the future held for the affiliate promotions. So this wasn't the best time to hold a title, but at the same time, it was one of the best women to hold the title. So you didn't really see it. And then at one point, NWA was defunct until Billy Corgan bought the rights to the NWA and its titles. So at the time when you're seeing Billy Corgan really build up the NWA again in a very organic way, with starting out with making Nick Aldis a traveling champion and really building up the 10 pounds of gold. My mind, as you start seeing this really amazing success of the 10 pounds of gold that was on YouTube, and really started to put the lens on NWA, I was hoping, that they were going to bring the NWA World Women's Championship back. And certainly that was the idea of Billy Corgan. And they brought back the NWA 70th anniversary show, and they revived the NWA World Women's Championship. And I love the way they did it, because they had this amazing video package to remind everyone that Jazz was still the holder of that NWA Women's World title. And it really got everyone shook, the way that Jazz was making it clear that she was still a defending champ and she was not letting that title go. And she even made Nick Aldis a little bit afraid. He was really excited to have her as a counterpart, as both of them would have been the heads of the company, with them holding the heavyweight championships. So we see that Jazz does return. She comes to defend her title at the NWA 70th anniversary show, and she faces off against Penelope Ford and successfully retains her title. Everyone is excited to see the title reign from Jazz. She's getting her flowers for being one of the pioneers of this new age of women's wrestling. She could stand toe to toe with Nick Aldis, as I mentioned, as a worthy female heavyweight champion. Everything was perfect. And she faced off against Allie, Jordan Grace, and Thunder Rosa during this time that she was bringing up the prestige again for the women's title. And she was booked to face off against Allison Kay on April 27, 2019 at the Crockett Cup. But she had to vacate the title due to medical and personal reasons. And if I'm telling you, I was so distraught during this time because I really wanted to see this. I really wanted to see them really go hard with this title reign. But obviously, you know, things happen. You can't really oh, I completely agree with this comment. I did really love that match between Penelope Ford and Jazz. If you haven't, because it is still available, check it out on the NWA's YouTube page. I think they still have like highlights from the 70th anniversary event. We don't know what's going to happen in the next year with NWA, with like what's going to be available on YouTube, because they did announce, obviously it's a bit like a sneak peek because we still don't know all the details, but they did announce that they would be moving on to TV deals. So we don't know how the landscape is going to look for their YouTube channel. So I'll implore you, if you want to watch old episodes of NWA Power, if you want to catch up, because they're having a new season this week, to definitely check it out now. I'm going to go to some of the comments. I completely agree with this. Mistress is very underrated. Okay. Oh yeah, and I loved her tag team with Daphne. Rest in peace, Daphne. I haven't been able to really talk about Daphne yet because this still hurts, man. Like I can't get to it yet, but I would like, especially would deep dive to look at Daphne's career, because a lot of women took some pointers from Daphne in this latest age that we have wrestling. So yeah, I really loved Barbie Hayden as well. I thought that she just had a really strong title run, but because of the fact that a lot of things couldn't be televised from her run, sometimes it can be a bit forgotten. So yeah, let's see. Let me find some of the matches. Yeah, I was able to, fortunate enough, see a lot of different NWA Women's World Title matches on YouTube. I don't think, I know that I saw a Barbie Hayden and Santana Garrett match. And I think I saw a match where the match where Jazz won the NWA World Championship. So I think you might be able to luck out and find that. Let's see, I remember the match because yeah, so it was like Jazz was on this amazing run and then it just stopped. So it's still, obviously, it hits a chord, but just like we said, they're human too, and there are a lot of things that come up in life that they have to tend to as wrestlers. So at least we saw that NWA with Billy Corgan being the owner really wanted to push for Jazz to have a really cool run. So that was great. But of course, things happen, and Jazz is working behind the scenes for NWA now and really helping the younger female talent to come out with these great matches that they've been doing lately. So even though it didn't work out with Jazz having this super long run at its current stage of NWA, at least, you know, we were able to see some televised matches from her last title reign, her NWA title reign, to at least make us feel like, especially with Jazz's pedigree, that she was a very successful NWA World's Women's Champion. With that, we have, because it was such a surprise, I'm pretty sure, to Billy Corgan, that Jazz was not going to be able to continue to hold the title, a title reign that lasted 948 days. We go to really getting back to basics and seeing what women could be a formidable follow to Jazz's amazing NWA run. And that's when we have Allison Kay come into the picture with her holding the NWA Women's Championship. And at this point, we have NWA Power come into the picture, where we have a weekly show to really showcase that women's title. And at the Crockett Cup, Kay defeated Santana Garrett to win the vacant championship, starting her reign with the newly revamped NWA World Championship design that really took the title back to its roots, because Billy Corgan was able to get the original plates put back on the title. And then we had the Burke. The real Burke title was brought back, and it just in an amazing way paid homage to the first NWA Women's Champion, Mildred Burke. It was just awesome to see that title. It is, to me, my favorite NWA Women's Championship design that they have had. So we see the unveiling of this belt, and Allison Kay is the first woman to be able to have that revamped title. And Allison Kay had her first title defense against Marty Bell in Ring of Honor. And throughout her championship reign, Allison defended her title against Heather Monroe, Casey Carlisle made a little bit of comeback, ODB, and Reign. However, at NWA Hard Times, Kay lost the title to a very hungry, passionate, and fan favorite Thunder Rosa. Thunder Rosa came into NWA and really was able to thrive and connect with the fans in the studio taping setting, which is not an easy setting to really, make it. And I think that it was kind of like a precursor to what a lot of wrestlers were going to have to face with the pandemic that was coming up, because this studio setting was very intimate, and it made the fans feel like she was relatable and that she could really just talk to them and really do things in the ring that a lot of them weren't doing at that time at NWA. So then it really became a demand that these women were going to really have, where the fans were going to really push for Thunder Rosa to be the champ. And I think with the NWA Power Show, that was one of the first times that you really saw the fans really push for the champ, for a new champ. And I think that that's like one of the best ways to come into a promotion, where you really make that much of an impact that the fans are really demanding for you. They really got behind her story on how she made it into the wrestling world, what she wanted to bring to not just the wrestling world, but bring to that title. And boy, did she carry that title well. The Allison Kay match against Thunder Rosa for the NWA World Women's Championship at Hard Times was amazing. Let me see. Yeah, what's the top five? The top five NWA World Women's you would like. That's hard, because there's so, because just like, stated in the beginning, there's so many great matches just from the history of the World's Women's Championship, NWA World's Women's Championship history, that is really hard to condense it to a top five. And then what I would like to see now with these new crop of women in NWA, that's a tough one. If I had to say in the past, one of the first that would championship defenses that I would have to put in my head would possibly be, as I said, Mischief and Amazing Kong's reign. Because it was just this whole feud that went to different promotions and really encapsulated like this time where you had champions pretty much having 5 or 6 different belts at a time and defending it well. So that would be the first from the past championship reigns. Currently, what I would like to see in NWA for a championship defense would be I would like to see Kenzie Page fight Natalia Markova. I would die to see that, but yeah, we'll see if that happens. We'll see. Okay, let's see. Mine is one, Jazz 2 Allison Kay, 3 Camille, and I have to research Mischief in Austin because I've never seen a title reign in NWA. Nice. I would definitely recommend that you check out Mischief's title reign. It really deserves the attention for how she held that title. But as we see with Thunder Rosa's title reign, she really pulled this off because right when she won the title reign, we go right into the pandemic. And at the time, a lot of promotions had to be really creative with how they showed off that title and not have it just, die, let her title reign die. And that's when you had NWA and AEW really work together to showcase their champions equally. And Thunder Rosa made appearances on AEW that put NWA honestly on global watch, more than they could have when NWA Power initially came to be. And people really cared about Thunder Rosa. So in return, they cared about her NWA title reign. And I think at the same time, Thunder Rosa really helped Shida get a lot of attention towards her run, the start of her run in AEW as well. So it was a win-win for both companies. And everything that Thunder Rosa did with this title was very successful, and it really made that NWA World Women's Championship red hot at the time. So Thunder Rosa lost her title on October 27th, 2020. And it was obviously such an amazing run. I agree, but if it wasn't for Thunder Rosa, we couldn't have got Camille and Selena, the one girl that used to be listening Punk. I definitely agree with that. There was a lot that actually came from Thunder Rosa's championship that's really started to lay the groundwork for what we see with the title now, and a lot of women that held the title after that. So I totally agree. My favorite matches in Thunder Rosa's title matches was against Priscilla Kelly and Lindsay Snow. I totally agree. Those were some great matches. Like, Thunder Rosa was not playing during this title reign. She was taking on all comers, and it was something really awesome to see. And that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, I feel like Thunder Rosa really rose to the occasion during the pandemic and beyond, because that did not stop her from having such a strong title reign. It actually seemed like it helped her thrive, because some people, especially someone like Thunder Rosa, they're not going to see the obstacles. They're going to see how they can capitalize on what the scene is like, and she certainly did. So now we move into Serena Deeb's title reign. And I love that this time that Serena had that professor gimmick, and she was really trying to solidify that she in particular was not about the flash. She was all about what she can do in the ring. And obviously Serena is a wrestler's wrestler. That's what she brings to the table. And she's all about doing the work in the ring. And Serena definitely paid her dues leading up to this NWA World Championship title reign. She had been through a lot in the business. And I personally loved her time in WWE, because even though she did not fully get utilized in the way that she should, I think that AEW was trying to really showcase her well by solidifying that she was a bit separate from a lot of women that were a bit more flash in AEW. And Serena was able to carry the title for 9 months before, after that, the title went to, as we know, Camille. And let's see. The best match for me was Machine versus Mickie James in the NWA title. Okay. And Serena Deeb's title reign was great against different wrestlers like Allison Kane and Tay Mallow and Layla Hirsch and other wrestlers. I completely agree. I think with someone with Serena's experience in the ring, it helped to show a different type of title reign, where you had someone that was just that technically savvy to really put on some 5-star matches. So I agree, it was a very successful title reign. So I completely agree with you on that. And I think sometimes because of how strong Thunder Rosa's title reign was, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle sometimes in the conversations. But I think that Serena had a very strong title reign. So completely agree with you on that. So now we get into Camille's title reign. Someone that actually started out as the enforcer for Nick Aldis, the insurance policy that would guard the 10 pounds of gold with an iron fist. The fans really started to like the mysterious, silent character that we saw in the early stages of Camille coming into NWA. But then they really started to demand to see a transition in Camille from an enforcer to a wrestler. And I think especially in this phase now of NWA, Camille is certainly branded, as an NWA talent. She really got all the nooks and crannies to who she became now with being an NWA. So that's kind of rare right now in this generation. So it's actually pretty cool to think about that she really has NWA written all over her, with the short history that she's had so far with the company. So after the fans really wanted to hear her speak and see her evolve into a wrestler, that became a reality. And she won the NWA World's Women's Championship. And if I'm going to be honest, I was a bit skeptical at first with Camille winning the title, given how new she was to wrestling, but she definitely put in the work and she proved that she was a worthy champion. She had 5-star matches with Max Van Peller, Layla Hirsch, Angelina Love, and Natalia Markova, just to name a few. And I think that especially with how the wrestling scene was moving about, where sometimes you had a lot of people leaving NWA, and then you had this new reign of NWA, and they were trying to formulate how the new era was. I think that Camille did a great job of holding this title and really making it a title that people still felt was strong even after Thunder Rosa and Serena's title reign. So Camille did a stand-up job with that. And at NWA 75 Night 2, Kenzie Page shocked everyone and dethroned Camille. Camille has such an impressive ride that honestly this win came as a shock because I did not see Camille losing this title. Honestly, I also did not see Camille losing the title to Kenzie. I really thought that Natalia was going to win that title at night 1 of NWA 75, especially with the match that they put on. That was really shocking. And that's saying a lot, especially sometimes in the wrestling industry where you can pretty much call like who's gonna win based on your seeing like how they're really pushing for someone, and you can kind of see that they're going to be the ones to hold the title. Kenzie Page winning was a hell of a shock to me. Camille's best matches for me were versus Allison Kay, Talia Valkyrie, Kylie King, and Natalia. Gave her a run for her money. Totally agree. There were so many matches because of how frequent Camille defended that title. And she would go to so many different promotions to defend the title that I completely agree. There are so many great matches to name from this. And I love how, once again, NWA constantly making sure that they're showing that this NWA World Women's Championship is one that is defended around the world. And it is cool to see that because then you get these dream matches that sometimes you can't if someone is exclusively tied to one promotion. So I agree, these were great matches. Chelsea Green and Kylie King and Kenzie Page and Tyler Valkyrie were great opponents for Camille. Totally agree. You're not gonna get a different answer from me. That's for sure. So yeah, Kenzie Page wins the NWA World Women's Championship at NWA 75 Night 2. Hell of a surprise for me, but at the same time, Kenzie was definitely putting in that work in 2022, leading into 2023, when she held the NWA Women's TV Championship and really started making a name for herself. And her cocky belief that she would win the title actually paid off. And at a very, very young age, Kenzie has actually done a lot in NWA. She's a part of Pretty Empowered. She was able to hold the women's tag team champs, the TV championship, and now the World Women's Championship. she now holds the Burke. And Paige has had a successful title defense recently at the October 25th Sam Hand pay-per-view for NWA. And in this match, this title defense, she really continues to prove how tough she is, how she can really handle and manipulate the crowd, which is something I'm all here for, because I love when you have wrestlers that really know how to play on the emotions of the crowd and really just stiff arm them for it. I really love that. And her ability to back up her words with her title defenses. And so far, this is very early on in Kenzie's title reign, but she's certainly showing how she's already talking that talk and walking that walk. Let's see the oh yeah, so far Kenzie Paige versus Ruthie J is one of my favorite in title reign. I totally agree. That match is available. The full match against with Kenzie Paige versus Ruthie J is available on the NWA YouTube channel. Before the new season kicks off tonight, I really want to implore you to watch it if you haven't. Yes, Mackenzie Paige is a firecracker, and she is very underestimated. So I would love to see who would be some of her best matches in the future. Who do you think would be some of her best opponents? That is a good question. I would love, especially after this match that Ruthie J had with Kenzie, I would love to see them fight again. I'm always going to keep pushing for Natalia Markova to get a chance, not only to challenge the champion, but sometime in the future, hold that title, okay? Because she was putting in the work this year. So hopefully we can actually see Natalia hold that title, or have a really strong title defense to challenge for the title, like she did in that amazing street fight that Markova had with Camille. So maybe we'll see that with Paige, that she'll be able to do that. Someone else that I would like to see Kenzie go against would possibly be MJ Jenkins, because I feel like NWA probably will be pushing for MJ, especially when she recently had a really good match with Max Impaler. So I'm hoping that we see more of MJ Jenkins, because she was kind of holding her own with Max Impaler. So if she can continue on with that, then she definitely would be a formidable opponent for Kenzie Paige. But there's so many women that I can see Kenzie really having some good matches with, is really heating up for NWA for the women. I like to see Kenzie Paige versus Taylor Rising or Misa Kate. I completely agree with this. See, this is why this is so hard, because this new era that they have for the women in NWA is that the card is so stacked for the women that Kenzie can actually face off against, that the possibilities are endless. So I'm really excited to see who gets to challenge for that title. And then I'm not trying to rush Kenzie Paige's title reign, of course, but I'm curious to see in the future who will hold that title next. So I'm definitely agreeing with these choices for who should challenge Kenzie Paige. So as we know, we have gotten to the end of the long history so far, but the illustrious history of the NWA World's Women's Championship. I had so many things planned, as well as like showing you guys certain champions that usually weren't talked about recently for it, but a bit of technical difficulties, but I am happy that it seems like even with my descriptions of these champions that maybe some might not know about, that now that has piqued everyone's interest. So please look into this amazing history of the NWA Women's World Championship. I definitely will encourage everyone to check out the new season of NWA Power. We don't know what's ahead of us with this new era, because everything has been so amazing so far in the past few months after NWA 75 that I'm pretty sure it's just going to keep heating up. We don't know what happened with the TV deals, so that's going to be another exciting thing for NWA's future, possibly at the beginning of 2024. I'm assuming that we might get more information on what might happen with the landscape of NWA as far as them moving into having some TV time and being able to possibly compete with other promotions that have TV deals already. But yes, please check out NWA Power. It is available on YouTube on Tuesdays at 6:05. Oh, let's see. I mean, look, maybe the part two could be about some of the best title defenses that have been a part of the catalog of the NWA World's Women's Championship. I definitely agree with that. That would actually be cool to explore on Deep Dive. So yeah, we'll do that. And once again, I really apologize because I had like a whole thing set up with the pictures of a lot of champions that weren't able to have their championships televised. So I will definitely make sure that that is included, especially if I go over a few great feuds that a lot of women have had in NWA Women's Championship history. I will definitely have the pictures to go along with it, so you can look it up and go over some great women's history. So thank you guys so much for making this debut episode of Deep Dive awesome. I love obviously talking about this amazing rich history of NWA, and certainly the women of NWA make it also a very important promotion, but then also really help to make the history of NWA as a whole just as important. So stay tuned because we're going to have some really great episodes of Deep Dive coming up soon. I'm going to be touching on a lot of different subjects in women's wrestling, so you don't know each week where we might go. Well, actually bi-weekly, where we might go with each episode, but it's just important that you stay tuned and that you come back in and share some amazing memories that you have, as you did today when we're talking about this. And I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you come back for the next episode. But in the meantime today, remember to check out NWA Power as they're going into their next season at 6:05. I enjoyed this, and I hope to see you guys soon.
Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet.